we'll move on to hurling, I suppose. Obviously speaking about the Cork senior hurlers. How would you reflect on the 2020 league and championship for the hurlers? Obviously, I suppose disappointment in many ways, like beat the Dubs, but at the same time there were defeats in there to Tip and Clare. Oh no, Waterford, I think it was. So, how would you look back on it?
Yeah, the Waterford defeat was very disappointing, all right. But maybe some Cork fans underestimated Waterford, especially I don't think the round robin would have suited them. Just the traditional Munster Championship would have suited them more. And fair play to Waterford. They got to the All-Ireland final and on merit as well. And deservedly beat Cork on the day. As you said, I know he felt pretty sad about Cork beating Dublin. But I actually tipped Dublin for that game, and Cork actually changed their side a small bit as well, bringing in the likes of Jack O'Connor and Dickie Dalton into the team. And it worked. It worked at fairness. And against Tipperary, I actually don't think Cork were that bad. I know some people would say disgrace and all that. Cork shouldn't be out in the qualifiers, but we're a developing team. We're young. We've brought in a lot of young players now. The likes of Anthony Nash, Aidan Walsh, Conor Lehan. Yes, they were good players on their day, but maybe it's just time to let them go and maybe focus on the younger talent, the likes of Shane Barrett, Alan Connolly. And what I saw against Tipperary as well, for the first time in a while, the fact that Cork just whack it up the field and hope for a score really, and it nearly always ends up wide. For once, the Cork hurlers actually worked the score at a point in the game. I remember Tim O'Mahony's score, I think there was about 5 puck passes in the sequence of play, and then it goes back to Tim O'Mahony, a brilliant score over the bar. Yeah, I think it's a developing Cork team. I think a lot of people underestimate them now this year, a bit the same like Waterford last year. And hopefully the Cork hurlers can pull a few shocks, because I think we're bringing in a young side now, and hopefully they'll flourish with Kieran Kingston in charge.
Yeah, it's an interesting one with Cork, because on one breath I kind of think like what you said there, like you can't really underestimate them. I don't think you can underestimate anyone really in Munster, like in the Munster Championship in hurling, because I think year on year every team, the teams you underestimate, whether it be Waterford in last year, Tipperary 2019, Limerick 2018, they always just seem to come back and find a way, and it's always very, very competitive. Against the Dubs, I think Dublin were really poor that day. And I think I'd probably look at it in a similar light to you, in the sense of, I think with Dublin they have to kind of look at some bringing through more younger players rather than relying on kind of some of the older guard. But I suppose, like, obviously we're here to speak about Cork hurling, but like what do you think's kind of gone wrong for Cork hurling, I suppose, in the past 10, 15 years or so? Like, I suppose it's like, I was looking back there, I think it might be the longest time without winning an All-Ireland ever for Cork hurling if they don't win it this year. So I suppose it's quite the gap.
It is quite the gap. It's way too long. Like 2005 was the last time we won it. To put the context, I was 4 years of age at the time. It's unheard of. It's definitely unheard of, but you have to take into account the Kilkenny team, the great Kilkenny team after that, winning, 7 All-Irelands in the next 10 years. It was incredible form. And even, new teams coming to the fore, the likes of Galway, the likes of Limerick, and the Clare team, of course. And maybe it was an opportunity missed in 2013 against Clare, but I still stand by the fact Dublin possibly should have beaten Cork in the All-Ireland semi-final. Maybe Ryan O'Dwyer shouldn't have got sent off. Like, the first yellow was very harsh. The second yellow, okay, was, but still very harsh. And Cork had a fluky goal at the end to win it. But against Clare, maybe it was just an opportunity missed for Cork. I think it was an even bigger opportunity in 2018, in all honesty, against Limerick. Like, we were, 8 points clear with 7 minutes to go. And then Limerick didn't need to score a goal. They tapped over the points and even went ahead before full time ended. Cork needing a point to equalise. So, and then, since then, it's really gone downhill for Cork. It's amazing how Limerick and Cork have progressed over the years after that game. Look at Limerick, they've been the all-conquering team in many ways. And then Cork have struggled badly in the next 2 years, obviously finishing the qualifiers in 2020. But I'm hopeful now this year. Look at the young players coming through. We have the older guard out now. We have no excuses. We could just go out and express ourselves and, play the hurling that Cork people are used to in many ways.
Yeah, absolutely. Yeah, I think in the past 5-6 years, yeah, I think you've been quite unlucky at times as well. I think 2018, obviously Limerick deserved to come back in the end, but on another day, I think Nicky Quaid makes that save at the end of the game. Another day that probably goes in.
Yeah, Patrick Horgan, unbelievable player, and definitely deserves all the praise over the last few years. But you are right in many ways. Like, Cork needs some more players. But in fairness, last year I thought more players than other years actually stepped up a small bit. Shane Kingston actually performed in big games in many ways. In the games against the likes of Dublin and Waterford, maybe underperformed against Tipperary, but that's where he needs to improve, just to be more consistent. And what I noticed as well, Seamus Hartney averaged 4 points a game for play. I think that was impressive last year from him. And maybe he could kick on this year. Yeah, Horgan, unbelievable player as always, but we do have forwards coming up. We do have Shane Barrett, unbelievable player, the under 20s. Alan Connolly literally led Blackrock to the victory in the club championship in Cork. And also he was brilliant in the under 20 championship as well until it got cancelled. Yeah, I think we do need more than Pat Horgan, and I think we definitely have the players, the likes of Hartley, Kingston, and the two young lads, Barrett and Connolly as well.
Yeah, Pat Horgan definitely on his day, like with him in the team, I think definitely you have a chance of beating anyone. He's almost like always Joe Canning or Clare's Tony Kelly. Like, he's just one of the best on his day. Like, I suppose looking at Division 1A, obviously you're in there with Clare, Tip, Galway, Limerick, and Westmeath. So how do you reckon you will get on there?
I think the league is more of a learning curve for Cork. Like, I don't think relegation, well, certainly not relegation, shouldn't be in mind given Westmeath. They will give a good challenge. They have good players like Killian Doyle, I'm sure, but I think if Cork lose to Westmeath, it'll be nothing short of a disgrace in many ways. But yeah, I think it's more of a learning curve, just bringing the young players, the likes of Barrett and Connolly, Kieran Joyce at centre back, try out Robert Downey at full back, and maybe try someone like Damien Callahan at wing back, where I think he flourished last year in the league. He played around cornerback, full back in the championship, and to be honest, I don't think it suited him at all. And maybe we could try a few more goalkeepers between the Collins brothers, Pat and Jur, who are going to replace Anthony Nash at the team. So I think it's more of betting in the players, either returning from injury, if you're looking at Dar Fitzgibbon, who was out for the whole year last year, or betting in young players such as Kieran Joyce or Alan Connolly, or betting in new players such as Ger Collins and Pat Collins, in the goalkeeper department. I know they've been around the panel a few years, but they haven't really started games. Anthony Nash has always started them, usually. And try players in new positions such as Callahan at wing back, Robert Downey at full back, and hopefully get this Cork team ready for the championship.
Yeah, I think using that as a pre-season in many ways, I think will probably be the way I'd imagine Cork would use it anyway in some ways, because obviously you could probably rest a lot of players, try a lot of different players out, and I don't think you're ever really in doubt of being in that relegation battle or finishing bottom or whatever. So would it be fair to say that like who would you kind of look at then as one of the teams maybe to, I suppose, finish top? Like Limerick have obviously, they won every game last year. They're obviously the favourites for obvious reasons. Tip and Galway are usually always thereabouts. Clare were obviously in the final, of course, last year as well. So who would you look at? Well, I suppose Clare are in the other group, but who would you look at to, of course, make that final?
It's a very tough one. Like, there's actually a lot of very tough teams in hurling. I know there's loads of teams in football, up to 32 sides, but I think they're more spaced out. In hurling, they're very close together. I know Limerick may have won the All-Ireland comprehensively last year, but against Galway, I think it was 4 points in it at the end, and they had Joe Canning and Cathal Mannion go off. Cork weren't at their best last year. Tipperary certainly weren't at their best last year. I don't know about Kilkenny, really. I think they've lost, a bit of their mojo. But looking at our group, I think you have to back Limerick to top it in many ways. But write Galway off at your peril. If they have their full team fit and they come up against Limerick on a good day, Galway could beat them, definitely. Tipperary have to improve. Like they can't get worse in many ways. Like I know they reached the quarterfinals, decent for any side, but they kind of underperformed last year. And look at Watford. I don't know, they have the same age as last year in many ways. I know they still have tied the Borg. It is still Stephen Bennett. And Liam Cahill is an outstanding coach. But I think a few teams might have found them out. And that could be their downfall in many ways. But I think Limerick will top it. But I think Galway and Tip and maybe Cork even will be very close to them in the end.
Yeah, I think it's going to be interesting when Waterford are right, because I suppose they'll have a settled squad anyway. They might go with more or less the same team, but certainly with Desi Hutchinson, Stephen Bennett, obviously they were kind of more fresh players last year. Calum Lyons, of course, as well. So it'd be interesting to see like how they get on as well. Is there any other teams you'd even be looking at that you think might be able to cause a shock or two, even in the other group? You've obviously got Dublin, Antrim, Laois in there as well. I suppose Laois would probably be the team I'd look at to get relegated, but who do you reckon yourself?
It's going to be very tight relegation, all right. You look at in that group particularly, like Antrim, Laois. I know Dublin have a few young players coming through, but it takes a while to bed them in. So I think they're still could get beaten on the day. You look at Laois in 2019 against Dublin, anything can happen really. And Antrim, I think the comments by Donal Cusack were very disrespectful to Antrim, in fairness. I think that was one of the worst games they played against Kerry, but at the same time, if he watched them in the previous games, he would have noticed Antrim are a very good side. And they beat Kerry, I think, 3 times last year. And Kerry are a decent side, like Brendan Cummins in the backroom team. Well, he was in the backroom team last year. And Antrim beat them 3 times, and fair dues to them for that. They do have Neil McManus back in the team, which is a huge boost for them. Conor McCann, who's an outstanding player, Niall McKenna, James McNaughton at centre forward. So Antrim will be challenging for survival along with Laois and Dublin. It's going to be a tight one, but I think the top 3, you'd have to say, will be Kilkenny, Wexford and Clare. Maybe, I don't know, will Wexford drop into that relegation dogfight as well? Maybe. I don't know really, like Wexford were underperforming in many ways last year under Davy, but I think there'll be a spark about them this year. Again, like Cork, they'll be under the radar a small bit, and fellas like Lee Chin and Conor McDonald could step up and perform for them. And Clare even have a few players back in. I think they might be a team to watch, the likes of John Condon coming back to the team from injury. So I think Clare won't be, just a one-man team with Tony Kelly in the team. I think a lot of their players like Cathal Malone and, as I said, John Conlon will step up and for Clare possibly the top spot. I think it'll be between Kilkenny and Clare to get it. I think Clare will get it in the end. But I think as for teams to watch, I'm looking at Antrim. I think they'll have something to prove maybe after Donald's comments after the Joe McDonagh Cup final in 2020.
Yeah, I think Antrim are a great team, and even when you look at some of the scores they racked up throughout the Joe McDonagh Cup, like they into double figures most times, into the 20s, sometimes the 30s. So definitely a very highly talented team. And in regards to Dublin as well, like it wouldn't surprise me if we beat a team like Wexford or Kilkenny, but then lost to Antrim. That's kind of the way it's been with Dublin hurling the past few years. But it's going to be interesting to see, I suppose, how it all pans out. But look, listen, Mathew, cheers anyway for coming on. I suppose before we finish up, obviously you set up a podcast yourself. So do you want to speak a bit about that?
Yeah, of course. I started this podcast at the end of December last year, seeing as restaurants were closed until now, at least until the start of June. And I didn't have college for like a month as well. So I said I may as well start a podcast, just keep myself busy, just to keep myself distracted from the soccer and all that. Because as I said before, you'd get sick of watching soccer in many ways. So I started this podcast. I originally went with 2 episodes a week, but college assignments and all that, it's a lot of work really, but it's worth it in the end. Like I've I'm now approaching episode 20, which is absolutely unbelievable. I've had some legends of the podcast, such as Johnny Doyle, Owen Mulligan, Daniel Goulding, and Robbie Kiley as well, the Irish Examiner, writing an article about his interview with me as well. So, yeah, I've had some very interesting guests, both in ladies sports and in men's sports as well. Like, I go back to Mairead Shoiga, I thought was an unbelievable interview of mine. And yeah, I've had some amazing fans, of course, yourself, the likes of Sean Freeney, I thought was very interesting, Dara Kelly, Patrick Sharkey. I've had some amazing guests, really, and I can't thank people enough for all the support as we approach episode 20.
Absolutely, yeah. Well, I'll link it down below anyway for anyone to check it out. Definitely a great podcast. I loved the episode with Owen Mulligan in particular. I thought that was my favorite. But yeah, I'll link it all down below for everyone to check it out. And yeah, cheers anyway, Mathew, for coming on. Appreciate your time.
No bother, Aaron. Thanks for having me on.